Hi, folks. My name is Charles, and I'm the host of Go-to-Market Hackers, the show where we go inside the minds of go-to-market engineers and architects, creating systems that deliver winning outcomes. So maybe before I say a few words about our awesome guest today, I'll share a few words about myself. I'm a SaaS founder. I've led GTM teams at venture-backed startups for the past 12 years. And really what excites me, what drives me is understanding what the best GTM teams are doing to scale at massive speed and what are the best practices and the best tools to create these winning outcomes. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's about interviewing the actual practitioners, the folks who are building the systems and scaling them in order to generate these outstanding results. So instead of interviewing the CROs and the CEOs, going deep into the systems to understand how they work and how you can apply them for yourself. Because at the end of the day, my hope is that this podcast can provide concrete takeaways and actionable insights for you to be able to reproduce in your own startup or in your own job. Our guest today is Nathan van der Ritter. He's joining us from France. He's a growth hacker, GTM engineer. He's been building and scaling GTM systems with a bunch of awesome startups for the past 6 years. Nathan is a clay magician, and today he's going to be talking about the agentic workflows that he's developed, and he'll be showing us the best practices using one of the clay tables that he's built himself. All right, Nathan, we're so happy to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us. Maybe what you can do is start out by telling our viewers who you are, how you got into go-to-market engineering, and then, of course, we'll dive into some of the cool things and workflows that you've built with clients in terms of improving the GTM motions. But would love to hear more about you.
Sure. Thanks for receiving me. So, my name is Nathan. I'm from Paris. So, as you can hear from my accent, I'm French. So, basically, I've always worked in the grocery market. So, I started working right after my business school. So, I started working in a pharmaceutical startup. So, that was a great experience because I was only working with the two co-founders. So basically, I was the first employee. I was the marketing manager of the startup, so it was really great. I was working there more than 2 years. When I left the company, we were between 40 and 50. So it was really a great experience.
You said this was a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
So when you say pharmaceutical, was it a B2C? It was selling literally to consumers, or who was the target audience? Okay.
Yeah, for pharmacy and for laboratories also. So
Okay, got it. So B2B.
yeah,
Yeah,
B2B. Yeah, it was a B2B
that
company.
makes sense.
Great.
So you were growth for a pharmaceutical company, B2B.
Yeah,
That was for 2 years.
it was really great because I saw the startup when we were three, and afterwards I saw also the startup when we were like 40 or 50. So it was huge.
Wow.
Yeah, we fundraised. Yeah, it was really a great experience. So that was cool. And right after, I wanted to create my own company, so I built a SaaS with a friend who basically didn't work because the product market fit was not good enough to pursue. So right after, I wanted to continue in the growth area. So I took another job in another company with the leader in organizing seminaries for big companies. So the startup is called Nabu. I don't know if you heard about it because they're
Yep.
launching in US also, so that's pretty cool. And I basically worked also in the growth area, so I was handling all the outbound part in that startup and all the CRM enrichment part also. The one HubSpot, I kept enriching HubSpot with so many info. It was crazy.
So I think that's also a topic we talked about together is, oftentimes the GTM engineers, they do come from an outbound or, SDR outbound motions. So this is one of the hats you had. You had a marketing hat where you were doing CRM enrichment and CRM automation, but then you also had the hat which was like pure outbound and cold
Yeah.
outreach.
Yeah.
So you had kind of both backgrounds, and that's what led you into the GTM engineering world.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of my experience with Nabu, I saw Clay. I learned about Clay and I was like, damn, I think it's the best tool I ever see. So I just wanted to specialize on Clay and I wanted to create my own thing about Clay and just move on and help my own customers implement Clay and like outbound playbook, inbound-led outbound playbook, and CRM management playbooks with Clay to boost their go-to-market strategies.
So you basically went all in on Clay.
Yeah,
I saw you have different licenses and certifications, CRM enrichment, inbound automation, outbound automation, which is really cool.
yeah. Thanks.
So I guess one of the workflows and systems you'll walk us through is a Clay table. So I'm excited to understand that.
Yeah.
Anything else folks should know about you before we dive into kind of some of the things that you've built? And also, maybe for you, what is a GTM engineer? Like, what is the role of the GTM engineer? Oftentimes, I get the feeling that GTM engineers are brought in as very tactical folks. But when I take a step back, I know some GTM engineers that are also very strategic. So they combine the ability to basically map out what the whole process should be, but then go zoom in on automating specific parts of a much broader workflow. So, what does that look like for you? What is the role of a GTM engineer?
So that is a huge debate because everyone has a different definition of what is a go-to-market engineer. In my opinion, a go-to-market engineer is the person who builds, automates all the systems and workflows that the company brings into the market to promote its product or its services. So everyone says that they can replace X SDRs or X salespeople, but I think they are really complementary. So a go-to-market engineer massively boost the sales performance in order to make their life easier. So right now, in my day-to-day, I see like maybe three playbooks a go-to-market engineer can focus on: the outbound playbook, the inbound and outbound playbook, and the CRM enrichment playbook. If you want, I can dive in all those three playbooks.
Let's do it. Let's dive in. I'm excited.
Yeah. So basically, the outbound part, I think, is the easiest one because you do not need any technical skills. So basically, you build a TAM, so the total addressable market. So for example, you can do it with Clay, or you can do it also with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So basically, you begin with the companies. Right after, you just have to qualify all companies. So you don't want to, for example, target all companies of all industries. So you have to target your own industries and just qualify them. For example, if they use a tool, or if they use HubSpot, or if they use Salesforce. Right after, you find the people to reach out at these companies, and you enrich them with email, mobile phones, and a bunch of info in order to personalize the messages. And right after, you can use the sequencer like Lemlist if you want to go on LinkedIn and email, or instantly if you want just to go on email and just email them. I think the most common one because it is the easiest one. Right after, we have the inbound and outbound playbook. I think this is the most interesting one because you can capture all leads that are interested in your product or in a similar product. And that's really powerful because if you come with the right message at the right moment, you are pretty sure that you will close this person, you know. So for example, we have like website visitors, likes on LinkedIn, clicker ads, or many much info. And I will show you a playbook that is an inbound and outbound playbook in my example right after. And the last one is the CRM enrichment one. And I think it's the most underrated because when we talk about CRM enrichment, we always talk about, yeah, okay, I will enrich emails or mobile phones, but just the surface. If you want to really have, for example, your marketing team or the salespeople, you can enrich like biography about a person, all the LinkedIn background, the school, and so the BDR can call and have all that info about that person that is not the email or the mobile phone.
Got it. So if I summarize, you talked about the three motions. You talked about outbound, which is like the first place to go, and you characterize as the simplest one to set up,
Yeah.
where you, first of all, you have to obviously align on your ICP, the personas you're going after, and then, scrape that data or access that data in some way. And then you throw it into a sequencer. You talked about Instantly. You
Yeah.
talked about Lemlist and all these other LinkedIn automation tools. Then in terms of inbound, you talked about capturing a lot of signals. Is that it? So like,
Yeah.
how do you capture all these signals to make sense of it for the marketing team, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And then in terms of CRM automation, you're saying, hey, level one is doing the basics, getting emails and phone numbers and those type of things. But then you can go much deeper and enriching that with much more personal information that you can then use across the different campaigns.
Yeah, sure. For the CRM management part, we're always enriching contacts with email and phones. But as I said, we can go further with the biography and so on. But we could also enrich like a bunch of info about the company. So basically, we can scrap any information that is on internet. You have so many
Sure.
agents with Clay. For example, you can use OpenAI to scrap all info about the ICP of a company, about what they're selling, the value proposition they have, in order to personalize your email and to help your salespeople call the right person with the right information.
Yeah, I think one question I have personally is how do you sort through all that info and structure it in a CRM, right? Because you don't want to just completely dump everything in the CRM and then have
Sure.
all this noise. So I think the question becomes how do you distinguish between what goes into an outbound campaign from a BDR team, what goes into your CRM, what are the essential components of what goes into your CRM and those type of things?
So basically, you have to choose which you want to enrich. For example, in Clay, we can find a bunch of information. For example, for the contact part, you enrich like the email and the mobile phone. But if you want to go further with the biography, you can create a property in your HubSpot or in your Salesforce that is
Right.
like the biography of the person, and you can map it directly in Clay with the custom
Mm-hmm.
integration. So Clay have a bunch of integration. For example, Salesforce, HubSpot, they do not have it with Attio yet, but yeah, with Pipedrive, for example, you can,
Soon.
and
Yep.
from the table, you can see all the properties you've once created on the CRM part and just match the information you want to push.
That makes sense. By the way, this whole podcast is about understanding the tools and the systems
Yeah,
that the best GTM teams use. If we talk about the tools, clearly CRM is at the heart of your work and what you do. I've interviewed and talked with folks that are using N8N and Make and others, but I'm glad we're actually doing a deep dive in basically everything related to Clay, which is, I think, an awesome tool as well. Which, to be honest, it's the one that I don't know as much. Like I know N8N and Make more. The other maybe last question is: are there other tools that you recommend? Because you mentioned Instantly, you mentioned Lemlist,
yeah.
both, by the way, European startups.
Oh, yeah.
And you talked about a bunch of CRMs. Do you have a preference, or you're like, nah, you can use whichever one makes sense in terms of tools in general?
So basically, I think the main tool I use is Clay because I can source like so many people and so many companies. But I also use LinkedIn and Sales Navigator in order to find companies and find people at these companies. And I think it depends on the client. For example, there are so many CRMs today, and so a go-to-market engineer needs to
Yeah.
know about all those tools. So for the CRM part, I've already used Pipedrive,
Right.
HubSpot, Salesforce, and Attio. So Attio was the most
Okay.
complicated one because there were not any native integration with Clay. So you just have to play with GTP API, like nothing really complicated. So yeah,
Nice. That makes sense.
everybody says that a go-to-market engineer needs to be really technical, but I think that was before OpenAI, ChatGPT, and so many resources that are
Right.
online. Even if you're not technical, if you understand what is behind it, you can play with it
Hmm.
and just succeed. And yeah, right after for the sequencer, so we have Lemlist instantly that I have already quoted, but we can also see Lagos Machine, which is French, but we
Hmm.
can also see
Yeah.
Smart Lead, for example, in order to
Sure.
send many and many more emails. And Hayrich, if you only want
Yep.
to go on,
Yep. I know them.
if you only want to go on LinkedIn.
Those are good tools. I know all of them. I tend to agree, anyways. You can have your tools that you love, which is in your case, Clay, but you need to be able to dabble in a bunch of different tools, especially for you. I mean, right now you're basically consulting in this GTM engineering role. And so whenever you get dropped into a specific startup, I'm sure they have their whole sets of tools
Yeah,
that they're using that you have to be able to be familiar with.
sure. So many startups ask for advices on the tools they use, but for example, you can't really change the CRM tomorrow. There are so many data in the CRM. So, for example, you have to adapt for the CRM part, but for example, for the outreach part, for the outbound part, you can always change, I don't know, Lemlist to Smartly if you want to go only on
Right.
emails
That makes
and if you
sense.
want to begin to do volume on emails. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So should we dive into some of the different workflows that you've built and you've done in the past?
Yeah, sure. So I have a little surprise for you. So I know you host the Go-to-Market Engineer podcast. I assume that you wanted to have more viewers, so I just wanted to build a clear table around it. So this is an inbound-led outbound playbook. I don't know if you see my screen.
Yep,
Yeah.
we can see your screen. Looks
Okay,
great.
perfect. So
Hmm.
I wanted to scrap people reaction on go-to-market engineer posts that are on LinkedIn. So I wanted to scrap, for example, 4 people that I followed on LinkedIn. So, for example, we have
Hmm.
you and we have other, I don't know how to say it, but maybe go-to-market influencers. That could be a great target because they are interested in go-to-market subjects.
For sure.
So, when we're doing that, we have a bunch of information. So, we have the URL post, we have the text, we have the author. For example, this one was Michael Sauja, which is an
Yeah, yeah.
influencer, a
Yep.
go-to-market influencer that I follow on LinkedIn. And yeah, we have all the reaction they have on their post. And we can scrap it. So right after I send it to another table. So I have all the people that liked or comment on those posts in order to target them. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. So let me just summarize to make sure everybody's following.
Yeah,
You said, okay, obviously this is GTM hackers, so let's go with the specific topic at hand. We have four GTM influencers, and basically you're going to be looking at the posts that they're driving on LinkedIn, and then the specific reactions, whether it's comments or
yeah,
likes that these posts have. And then you're going to be scraping basically who are the actual LinkedIn profiles of the folks that reacted to those different posts
yeah.
in order to then presumably maybe target them or put them in a specific campaign.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So basically, I only scrapped like for the last week and only for four people. But imagine you can add as many people as you want. For example,
Mm-hmm. Of
I have only four, but I could, for example, add like thousands of LinkedIn profiles that I
course.
want to follow. And every time they do a new post, I will have the reaction there automatically. So you have nothing to do except waiting for answers, you know?
So it's interesting. I mean, first of all, I've been put in lists like this where the outreach is, hey, Charles, I see that you follow Alex Hormozy.
Yeah,
If you like his last book, you should check out this. And I think it actually works decently well.
yeah.
So it's a good example.
Yeah, yeah. I think this is a really great example of inbound lead on playbook because you already know that those people are interested in go-to-market subjects. So why not your podcast?
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Great.
So right after we have main info on the author. So we have the profile, the LinkedIn URL of the person, the name, and the profile picture if we want to use it. But I think
Sure.
nobody does that. But why not? And yeah, right after I have an API with ChatGPT in order to gather many info in order to personalize my email or my LinkedIn messages. So for example, I have the LinkedIn URL, the LinkedIn profile of the person. So I wanted to do a LLM prompt in order to scrap many info about the person. So for example, let me go through the result directly. So I wanted to scrap the company domain, the company LinkedIn URL, the company the person is working for, the job title, and the reasoning is great to have in order to see if the LLM is well working or not. So, for example, if I show you the prompt, so navigate to the exact URL provided in LinkedIn, identify the parent's current job section, so extract the current employer company, the current job title,
Sure.
find the company LinkedIn URL, the company domain. Just be specific. I use the Clay agent, but I don't know if you know about Clay, but you can use like Anthropic, you can
Yeah.
even use Google, you can use OpenAI. So basically, for all my clients, I use OpenAI because I have an API with it, and it's really,
So yeah.
yeah, it's really cheaper than any other providers, AI providers.
So that's actually what I was going to ask. So why are you using then the Clayagent?
I'm on my free Clay account, so
Person.
I don't have
Okay,
my
okay, got it.
API, but
Got it. That makes
yeah,
sense. That makes sense.
but otherwise I use
And
the
have you found that there are some like, again, I use a couple of the different LLMs, but have you found that there are some use cases where OpenAI is better for certain tasks and, Claude is better for other
mm.
tasks?
Well, I always use OpenAI. For example, a big LLM, I can use Clayagent because Clayagent is really trained in order to spread a bunch of information on internet and
Hmm.
perform pretty well. But again, mostly I use really the OpenAI. For example,
That makes
I think
sense.
the most common one I use is the 4O Mini. And if the
Yeah,
4O Mini doesn't get me the qualitative results, I go for the 4.0 Mini, which is
got it.
a little bit more expensive, but I guess that's okay because the return on investment right after will be there.
That makes sense. All right. So, and then you export all this to JSON. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah. So that's some logic for me, but I need to explain it, yeah. So I always prefer to go on a JSON than on field text because you can manipulate all the JSON results right after, and it's really easier to manipulate. So for example, I just have to add the column if I want to create the column right there. So I already done it, so I will just delete it. But yeah, for example, the reasoning, if I want it, I will be able to use it. So I will have all the reasoning that I have for all my lines there.
That makes sense.
So
So this is the output, and then from that JSON, yeah, I guess I'm kind of interrupting, but the next step would
that's
then,
okay.
once you export that JSON.
Yeah, so I basically wanted to only reach out to people that are in your ICP, right? So I
Mhm.
assume that you wanted to have like salespeople, go-to-market engineers, but also founders, because founders are really interested
Sure.
in podcast and in go-to-market podcast. But I wanted also to eliminate a bunch of people that are not qualified in your podcast, I guess. For example, if you
Great.
yeah,
Got it.
let me show you. If job title contain any of sales, founder, or go-to-market, you need to validate it. But if it is only technical, only engineer, developer, software, data, IT, infrastructure, scientist, or analyst, this is not really your ICP, so you don't really want to target them because your message like won't be really qualitative or
Yeah, yeah, that makes
it
sense.
seems off. So, for example, if we observe the first 10 lines, business develop BDR, yeah, sales, go-to-market
Yeah.
engineer, founder, co-founder, go-to-market engineer. Here we don't have many info, only enterprise partner, top 5 creators. So we don't really know
Yeah.
what the person is doing. No job title provided to the keywords. Again, the reasoning is great to have in order to understand why the AI disqualified that person. For example, contains go-to-market, so validate it. And yeah, the other example that of disqualification was the cloud security consultant. I think this is not on your ICP, so just disqualifying it.
Right.
Yeah, titles poorly technical with no.
But I understand right now, I thought like I was under the impression that this was the short list. The 10 first rows are the short list, but you're saying that, oh, you're manually disqualifying it. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, I don't manually disqualify it. Like this is OpenAI, right? And like
Right, right, sure.
yeah, OpenAI disqualifying it. I just have to do the LLM and just
Okay,
run it
got it.
for every line.
That makes sense. I thought that these somehow had slipped through the cracks and then you had manually unselected the ICP
No,
status.
no,
But
no,
what you're
no, no.
saying is
No,
open it. Yeah,
oh,
that makes sense. So,
let me show you. For example, the ICP statue here is validate, right? And right here is
right.
do not validate. And right after,
Got it. That makes
I do a
sense.
formula in order to check if ICP statue is validate, right? So
Right. That makes sense.
if the ICP statue is do not validate, you can see it here. For example, validate
Yeah,
output true, do not validate output false. So it will only check,
that makes sense.
yeah, or validate ICPs.
So, but I'm curious in terms of you said this ran for like a week, I think, or a couple days.
Yeah.
What was the total list size at the beginning, and what are you left with at the end?
Okay, here I only have 8 posts, okay? So that's not many,
Right.
but I have more than 250 people only on 8 posts. So this is really powerful because you get a lot of people
Sure.
with only 8 posts. Imagine
Sure.
if you do it like with so many influencers that you have, for example, 100 posts. Imagine how many people you get,
For sure. For sure.
yeah, and just outreach them with personalized messages, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, I want you to run for all those people, but again, it's my free account, so we're sorry I can't do.
I understand. I
Yeah, I do
understand.
not.
The limitation was due to basically the credits in this free account that you set up.
Yeah,
And I understand that you can't open up the client accounts that you're working on. So no worries
yeah,
there. But
but
this
I
is a
have.
good
Yeah,
example.
I'm really sorry for that. I have non-disclosure agreements with all my clients, so I can't really go
All good.
through all their
Through live company dashboards. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, we're sorry. But basically, if I had my OpenAI API or if I have many credits, you just have to click on run and run all those 263 rows that haven't run, and it will automatically do it. So that's pretty simple,
That
and
makes sense. That makes sense.
I can do it for every prompt.
So, okay, this is a great example of a workflow you set up. And then the output of this is a JSON, which
Yeah,
is going to list the details of the folks that are a ICP fit. And then what would be the next step for you? Because presumably there's a lot of data in that JSON
yeah.
before putting it in the sequencer. So, what would be the next step for you?
Yeah, so the next step, I want you to gather information about the companies in order to have a personalized message. So let me go through the results. So I just wanted to gather the ICP of the company, the persona of the company, all the reasoning, the industries, and the value proposition. So let me go through the prompt because those are really interesting. Yeah. So I basically told the AI that it's an analyst who is an expert on marketing and ICP, and it's analyzing all the company domain and all the company LinkedIn URL. So I just wanted to gather the ICP, the industries, the persona, and the value proposition in order to build my personalized message right after. Yeah. So for example, if let's get the first company. So the first company is Maudem. I don't know about it, but okay.
Yeah.
So ICP is like small to medium-sized enterprise, startup, e-commerce, business agencies, and so on. And for example, the value proposition is to provide a full cycle, creative and functional approach to digital marketing, blending cutting edge technology, and so on and so on and so on. So we have a bunch of information and about a company in order to, for example, the personas, founders, revenue leaders, in order to, at the end, personalize our messages, right? Which is great. With Clay, you can also, for example, only run if, and we have disqualifying like two people, and so we do not want to enrich them, right? So we can only run for people who only run if
Sure.
ICP stage is checked. So that's great.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any question on that part.
No, I think that makes sense.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So right after, in order to outreach them, there are two ways. So whether I wanted to outreach them in LinkedIn, so that I have the LinkedIn URL, so I could not did that part, but I want to outreach them into emails. So I built my a little cascade. So I just wanted to use ICP because I think it's the less expensive one, like zero point 0.5 credit per row. Yeah. Afterwards, I wanted to use Full Energy because Full Energy, I think it's a wonderful tool in order to find all emails. I think it's the most qualitative one. I think it's a really great tool.
Nice.
And afterwards, I have like all work emails. And right after, I want to personalize the messages. So basically, I use OpenAI again in order to personalize the message. For example,
By the way, I will say it's super interesting because,
yeah,
again, I've done some different workflows and you have these nodes that you're basically connecting with. But here, basically, everything is structured in tables. So it's almost like the flow chart is like, hey, next you're personalizing the response, the actual outreach. And so basically, if you click into, hey, Michael, so this is a personalized response that is based off of
all info
both the
I had.
contact's
Yeah,
details.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let me show you. For example,
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to write a short, ultra-natural personal email for this person that works as this job title at this company about go-to-market topics, mentioning you host a go-to-market podcast. They can follow to improve skills for that company, right? With all the company information. So
Amazing.
yeah, that is amazing. So if you want to see the results, for example, hey Jay, I noticed you're working as a sales go-to-market engineer at Velocity Lines. It sounds like you're in the thick of things we are helping lean B2B teams optimize their sales processes. I host a go-to-market podcast where we dive into practical strategies for building effective go-to-market systems, which you might find helpful. If you're up for it, I would love to swap insights on what's been working for you lately. Happy to share a couple of episodes that align with your focus if
This
you're
is
interested. Yeah.
This is amazing. Really, it's amazing. So, and yeah, and if you want to open another one,
Yeah,
it's
me go. Yeah, for example, this is a great use case because instantly, yeah, it's like a go.
my God,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah. Hey, Ma, I noticed you're working as a go-to-market engineer at Instantly.ai, which must be an exciting space with all the growth and innovation happening in outbound sales automation. So, like, this is perfect, yeah, because it's talking
Wow.
about instantly, right?
Yeah, for sure. Last part is very similar, but the hook and the intro
Yeah,
is fully
yeah.
personalized.
It's
What's
always about
interesting,
the hook.
yeah, yeah, I have to say, like the quality is really, really high. I'm impressed because again, I've done some of these, but sometimes I find that the hooks are bad and the
Yeah.
intros are bad, and but these are really good.
When you think about the workflow, you have to think about the results you want to have. And in order to have the results, you just have to define all the steps you want to go in order to have these results, right? So, for example, I only want the ICP, but right after, I want to personalize all the message with the job title, but also with the company information, right? So, for the job title, it begins with the first LLM, if you remember. So, it was scrapping the job title there. Afterwards, I wanted to qualify the ICP qualification. And right after, I wanted to gather all information about this company and all that in order to well personalize the email, right?
The part about the value proposition of the company, how does that feed into the messaging? I'm curious because I agree with you. The information you collect,
Yeah.
upstream is obviously a huge influencer of what the output will look like. But I'm just curious in this case. So you're saying
Yeah. So
reason,
this
yeah.
this is basically my prompt, my LM prompt for every company because I think it's the best prompt to have because the ICP, the persona, the industries, and the value proposition, and it's only feeding OpenAI to personalize the email, right? But I guess I could be more specific with that prompt in order to, for example, say, focus on the value proposition of this company and personalize the email according to this value proposition. But I didn't do it right there. I just wanted to give the AI all information about the company and let it roll, you know?
But yeah, let it be creative with that
Yeah,
information. That's
yeah.
amazing. This is a great example. I really like it, and I'm impressed by the output, I have to say. So
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, I'm sure the conversions would be pretty good on this.
Like, I noticed you're doing some interesting work with no code automation at Enoch. It's a fascinating area, especially when it comes to streamlining HR and talent acquisition processes. Yeah, like,
Wow, amazing.
it's great, yeah?
Amazing. Yeah, it's really great. Again, like when I go through these motions, the quality isn't as good. So I can tell you're a pro and that you've done this quite a lot.
Yeah, thanks. And right after, if we wanted to continue, you just have like to, for example, I'll use, for example, Lemlist. So I'm on the free subscription, so I can't do it.
Free
But
plan, sure,
yeah,
sure.
you'll just have like to add another column with add lead to campaign. So that's basically really easy. And you'll just have to map all information. So you have to map, for example, the first name, the email, and yeah, you can also add, for example, custom messages. So that will be the personal go-to-market messages. And after in your sequences, you will pull the dynamic value, right?
That makes sense. So basically, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but you're saying that in this case, you would basically set everything up so that the campaigns, like when do you decide? You still have to go into Lemlist just to define the schedules and to define those things, right? And the maybe like let's say the follow-up responses and
Yeah.
what you do with the specific leads, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. For example, right there, we only have like to build a table and afterwards it will be automatic. On the Lemlist side, we have to do the manual work, like maybe 30 minutes or an hour, where we build the sequence. So for example, if you want to send one
Right.
email, two email, or three emails, for example, and yeah,
Mhm.
just prepare it. But you have nothing to do. I think it's maximum 30 minutes, right? Because all you do
So
in the clay
basically,
table,
yeah, exactly. No, that's what I was going to say. So all the content is in the clay
yeah,
table. It just pushes the information, the contacts, the information to Lemlist, to Smartlead, or whatever tool you're using.
yeah,
Then in those sequencing tools, you're going to create the different sequences.
yeah.
I guess you'd have to map which message would, relate to which
Yeah,
sequence,
exactly.
and that's it,
Yeah, exactly.
basically.
And you know, you have the auto update setting in Clay. So, for example, if another post arrives there, it will run automatically. So, new post arrives there. We have all those bunch of info. The get reaction or send table data will run also. I will have new people there, and like OpenAI will run automatically, and I will have all those information automatically, and all those email automatically, and all those personalized go-to-market email body automatically, and it will run on Lemlist automatically. So once the clay table is built, we have nothing to do left against like maybe build another playbook, right?
So that's super interesting because I'll tell you, I'm old school, like in the way that I think, like I would have campaign A running and then I would be looking at the performance and open
Yeah,
rates and all those things. But what you're saying is this is going to constantly source basically new leads and new prospects
yeah,
that you're adding to the clay table. And then you're adding those to the Lemlist campaign, for example, that is shooting out new. It's basically constantly enriching and constantly adding new
yeah.
contacts and wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the inbound outbound playbooks is the most powerful one because you have once the clay table is built, you have nothing to do. You only have to watch the campaign performance, right? And if you see that the performance isn't right, we can always change the clay table, but that's pretty easy once you've built it, yeah?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Makes sense. And I guess that's another question. Like, do you find yourself tweaking these on a regular basis? And I know that you're going to talk about maybe you can't show, but you can talk about other things that you've done.
Yeah.
But what have you found? Like, where typically are you tweaking? Is it in the data that you're capturing? Where are the areas in your experience where there's the most improvement to make?
If I change something on all my campaigns, it will be only like the copy, right? If I see that the performance isn't there, I only change the copy in order to see if it will change, right? And for example, if I've tested like three different copies and that like zero copy worked, it means that like the playbook is dead, right? It doesn't working, so I just have to move on and build another playbook.
Amazing. Listen, Nathan, this has been a really interesting workflow and use case. As you said, it's kind of like a good place to start when you're doing automation,
Yeah,
because this is where you're going to see presumably some pretty good results in terms of outreach and acquiring some new leads. I'd love to, from this segue maybe into other workflows that you've worked on where you've seen success and that you've also enjoyed building, because I feel like there's a pleasure in building these beautiful systems that operate very smoothly.
yeah, I love it. I truly love it. So yeah, I have so many playbooks in mind. So, for example, I think a really good playbook is website visitors, right? Because they have visited your website, so it's pretty easy to target, and yeah, it's not really random. So that's really great. In Europe, we don't have Airbnb, but for example, I used to work with US companies, so I'm always using Airbnb. I don't know if you know the tool, but Airbnb is
I
it.
use it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love the tool. Yeah.
it's identifying people that have visited your website. So you have to catch them. Again, you can match them against your ICP in order to see if you want to target them or not. And afterwards, you just have to, uh, like on MyClickTable, it's the same system, right? So you personalize the messages with all the info you gather about that person. So you could even do a biography about that person in order to personalize the message, or again, you can gather a bunch of information about its company, like we did, like I showed, in order to personalize the message. So that's really great. Another playbook is to build custom landing pages,
Uh,
right? Yeah, sorry.
just before we move to the next one, I don't even know, but does Clay have an integration with RB2B, or like how do you pull the information out of RB2B? Is it like the export, like a classic export, or
No, I do it by webhook, right?
through webhook? Okay,
Yeah,
makes
it's through
sense.
webhook. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Once the webhook is like set up, it's really easy because you have all the info you had on Airbnb and you do not have to do it manually, right?
That's what I'm saying also because timing is so important. Like you want to basically reach out to that person within ideally like a 3-minute window of them going on your
Yeah,
website.
yeah,
Though it's a bit creepy, but
yeah.
let's be honest, it's also very effective.
Yeah. For example, for one of the company, we do not email Airbnb contacts, but we send it directly to the BDRs with a whole bunch of info about the person. For example, a person from Airbnb comes in my click table and I enrich all the company info and all the person info. For example, the company information will be the ICP, the value proposition, and so on. And the person will be the mobile phone number and the biography with all the leadership and so on. And I send it directly to the CRM with all those information and it creating a task inside the CRM in order to tell the BDR to call that person because they visited our website on that page because we can identify the
Amazing.
page. Yeah,
Amazing.
this is
Yeah, of
amazing.
course.
Like,
So then when they reach out, they'll be able to mention, "Hey, I saw that you were looking at our pricing page."
yeah,
Is there amazing.
with all the
Amazing.
info about
I
the person, which call he made, you have all information about the person. You have a biography. So,
have you seen, and I'm sure this is being done, and it sounds obvious, but have you seen also like literally generating the script for the call
yeah.
based on all that information?
We could do it. So I could do it. Like it's pretty easy, just another LLM. But I
Sure.
think I let the BDR. Like I think,
Decide, yeah.
yeah, I let the BDR decide what you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, you can also like more and more now. You can even have an AI just kind of
Yeah,
automatically call and have.
yeah. That would be crazy. I don't know if you know Hey Rich. Do you know the tool called
Yes, yes,
like
yeah. Hey, reach, yeah,
yeah.
it's a great
Like
one.
I've never done it, but I've tested it like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was amazing. The result was really qualitative, and I was like, oh, that opened like 4 playbooks, yeah.
And can you specify what? Because there's a lot of capabilities within Hey Reach. So what specifically did you use, and what were you impressed by?
At the beginning, I wanted my sales team to record a Loom in order to explain why this company would be great for our product, right? Like the salespeople can't do it for every person that we outreach, so this is too
Sure.
complicated. And so HeyRich permits to generate AI videos, right? So you only have to give him a script, give HeyRich a script, and it will generate automatically AI video generated.
So wait, I think are you talking about then Hey Gen, not Hey
Ah,
Reach? Because
yeah,
I
that's Heijen. Sorry. Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay, okay,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I know.
Sorry.
I know Hey Gen too.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, no.
yeah.
All
Sorry,
good. Too
sorry.
too many
Yeah,
startups.
too many
So
steps.
you're
Yeah,
saying with Hey Gen with Hey Gen they were able to create these, but was it a screen recording or was it like just a video of the salesperson or the PDR?
yeah. That was a video of a salesperson, right? But again,
Nice.
I didn't go like at the end of the playbook, but I thought it was really powerful, but I didn't investigate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things to do in that space too.
Yeah,
I'm very familiar with them. They're a great startup. And I think with the video world, there's a lot to do for sure. Cool. And then you were going to talk about a landing page, also automation that you set up, I guess.
yeah. So basically, again, on the website visitors, for example, in Europe, we don't have RB2B, right? We have Snitcher
Hmm.
and so on because we have to be GDPR compliant. So we only identifying companies that have visited your website. So again, you have the name of the company, so you could enrich like a bunch of information about the company. And you can also, for example, enrich all people that are on those companies that fit your ICP, right? For example, just visiting my website, I could use Clay integration. I don't know if you know the self integration, but it permits to have like a bunch of people or even ICPs. They have an API with LinkedIn Sales Navigator in order to find the right people at the right company.
Okay.
So, for example, if I wanted to scrap founder of go-to-market Archers, I will have you. And
So I just want to make sure I understand. Is this a way to kind of like go around the
yeah,
restrictions of GDPR?
yeah,
That makes
yeah.
sense.
Like we only have the company, so I guess we are assuming that the person that have visited our website is our ICP, right?
That makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
hopefully.
So you're kind of like reverse engineering our B2B in a way.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And yeah,
That
right
makes
after
sense.
we have all of those people, but it feels like quite random to target them because you don't really know if they have visited your website. So you really need to personalize your outreach. So what you could do is like build custom landing pages. So a custom landing page, I do it with Webflow. So Webflow is basically,
Sure.
yeah, okay. So you could create custom landing pages with the logo of the company you're targeting with a bunch of information you just gathered about the company. And you just have to push, like, again, it's working the same way with that other, I don't know how to say it, sorry. You only have to push information that you gathered on Clay into the custom landing page in Webflow, right? You can even push the logo URL in the Webflow custom landing page and it will show the logo of the company, right? I don't know if maybe I can show.
Wow. No, yeah, I'm trying to piece this together.
Yeah,
So what you're saying is for some campaigns, what you've done is you've created, what are we talking, like what's the order of magnitude we're talking about? Like hundreds, thousands?
thousands of landing pages, yeah.
Thousands
Yeah,
of landing
yeah,
pages
for sure. Yeah.
programmatically with the logo of the prospect. And then you say, hey, I guess it's like some kind of demo or like it's just kind of like a static landing page
Like
with like, hey, this is the value prop for that specific customer.
Like most of landing pages are built is just to show that we are thinking about that person, about that company, right? It's not like a demo, but
Hmm.
it's really like it seems like your website, right? But with the company
Hmm.
logo. So
Yeah, it makes sense. That's
that's really
amazing.
personalized.
That is
And
amazing.
you just want to, for example, push the CTA, yeah, custom CTA. So for example, book a demo with me and you can output, for example, the first name or the company name with the company logo. You could even push the colors of the company, right? So there is a way on Clay to scrap all information about the company, right? But we can also get a
Right, the
screenshot,
branding.
yeah, the screenshot about the website, and afterwards we can have a AI agent that's scrapping the X color of that screenshot, and we will have the logo, we'll have the brand colors, and you can even push it into the Webflow landing page, right?
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
You've actually set up campaigns like this, but presumably that involves several people. I mean, I'm sure you're not the one setting up the landing pages in Webflow. You probably have somebody from marketing setting those up as well. I mean,
Right.
because that's a big project.
Like I did it for three companies. For two companies, there were like someone from the marketing team building custom landing pages because that's not my job,
Right.
right? I'm not really good
Yeah,
at
for sure,
that,
for
at
sure.
building custom landing pages. But I did it for one client, one customer. Yeah, it was great.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was really great.
Amazing.
And I don't know if we can get more personalized than custom landing page.
Sure, for sure. I mean, look, this is the dream of any marketer is to be able to create this kind of valet experience where you come in and it's like, hey, this is for you. This is your, like we've branded everything for you. This is your pain point. This is the value proposition for your specific use
Yeah,
case. That just makes it incredibly powerful. So that's awesome. I wish I could see different examples of
yeah.
these landing pages, but I'm just
Let me.
picturing them in my mind.
But
So
I have
maybe,
have shared
yeah,
some example of custom landing pages on my LinkedIn. So if people
okay.
just want to,
And maybe you can, yeah, maybe I can also pull them and I'll put them maybe in the show notes or something like that
yeah,
so that they
sure,
can
yeah,
see
yeah, for sure.
examples.
I've I've
Awesome.
done a post with many example of custom landing pages. So
Makes sense.
if they
Okay,
want
awesome.
to
So
say,
it seems like it's a workflow that you've set up a couple times
yeah,
because you've seen success with it.
yeah, sure.
Super
As I
cool.
said, I don't really know if we can go further than custom landing pages because just imagine if you're receiving an email that said, "Hey, I've built a custom landing pages for you," and for example, your name, your company name on the landing page with a bunch of information about your company. You're like, "Hey, what? That's crazy, right?"
It's
And
amazing.
so,
It's
yeah,
amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, for sure. Anything that shows that you actually do the work up front for the prospect and you bring value, I think is critical. And this is a great example of
Yeah.
that. Nathan, I feel like we could spend another hour going through specific workflows. Is there maybe one last one you want to talk about? And then I do want to make sure that we maybe kind of wrap up and summarize kind of the different things we talked about. But I'm just curious if there's another one that you can think of.
Hmm.
And also, like, typically when you're brought into a startup to work on, like, do you come in and say, hey, okay, you look at kind of what they're doing and then say, okay, from my perspective, we should start with A, B, C? Or is it typically the startups that says, hey, we want to do C, even though it might be not the first place that you would recommend starting? So those are my two questions. First one is there another workflow you're thinking of? And second of all, how do you work with clients and what is the typical kind of process there?
So for the first question, I think I can talk about my next workflow, right? So like I have so many workflows. For example, for the outbound part, like for the CRM management part, I've talked about what I've did, so I will not go on that part again. But for example, for the outbound part, I guess you know that you have so many outbound playbooks you want to target. For example, 4 or 5 industries you want to target. All playbook will be different. So I guess you just have to personalize each message for each industry and for each company and for
Makes
each
sense.
person. But yeah. And for the second question, sorry, I forgot the second question.
So for the second question is essentially, so let's say you get brought into a startup that wants
Oh
to
yeah.
streamline and automate a bunch of their campaigns or a bunch of their internal GTM motions. And again, there's a long list of things they want to do. And you come in and you're like, listen, this isn't going to have the biggest impact. You should start with this specific campaign or CRM enrichment. And they want to go straight to, hey, let's do some campaign. Like, how do you approach that? And I guess, yeah, what's the process for you?
Yeah. So that's a good point because like so many startups I'm working with like always have crazy ideas in order to
Yep.
yeah, they want to rush it and don't have really a good strategy to attack on. What I really say is we have first to work on the infrastructure stuff. So, for example, do you want to enrich your CRM with what info? Because like we have to build a custom template in order to be consistent for every playbook, right? So
Right.
that's the most important one. Once the infrastructure is done, I will always advise to go on the inbound and outbound playbook because those ones are automatic, right? So it will keep feeding our campaigns. And once you have built all these inbound and outbound playbooks, you can go on the outbound playbooks. So the static, total adjustable markets with static industries and static messages, right? So that's the main strategy. So I will just say like infrastructure stuff first, inbound and outbound second, and outbound third.
Makes sense. So basically, if we kind of summarize the different things you talked about from your perspective, there's kind of like three main pillars. There's the CRM enrichment,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the core of everything you do.
Yeah.
Then there's the outbound, which is an easy place to start, assuming you have proper CRM hygiene and all the data that's there. And then there's the inbound portion where there's a lot of things you can do. And then within those, of course, there's a lot of different workflows depending on
Yeah.
the ICPs, the motions that you're seeing success for, et cetera. And then the holy grail is being able to do all three and then orchestrate, your campaigns across those different workflows,
Yeah,
basically.
right. Yeah. And like the go-to-market engineer is the one who's connecting all tools together. So it has to be structured. And yeah, I wanted to also add for another playbook, if people want to investigate, there's a tool named Fibler. It's like a European startup again, but they're like tracking people that
Oh,
have clicked on your LinkedIn ads, for example, right? So
okay.
basically it's an inbound and outbound playbook again. But for example, you could do the same system that we've talked about website visitors or just likes, comments of people you're following, right? And like if you identify people clicking on your LinkedIn ads, is that they're already searching for a solution like yours. So you can target them as well. I didn't do it
So it's
for the
interesting.
moment, but I will definitely do it like in the next few weeks.
By the way, I couldn't found them. How do you spell the name? Feebler,
F
Feebler.
Fibler, right?
Got it. Yeah, I guess in the US they'd probably say Fibler.
Oh, Fibler, right?
Cool. I'm
Yeah,
gonna check
sorry.
him out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all good. Fibler, interesting. I'll check them out. I didn't know them.
Yeah,
By
Breton.
the way, maybe last thing, you talked a lot about inbound led, outbound playbooks. It sounds like this is really one of your go-to kind of campaigns.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because inbound led, like I always thought of it as, RB2B, inbound to your website, but it just shows that I have these kind of like barriers in my mind. The example you gave at the beginning is like inbound from LinkedIn, right? Folks coming inbound and reacting to your posts and engagement. And then outbound, it could be via LinkedIn, but it could be outbound via another channel.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's super interesting, and I like that you emphasize that approach a lot because it is an approach that's kind of a low-hanging fruit when you have folks that are already coming inbound regardless of the channel and expressing some kind of interest. They're the first people that you should be going outbound to and reaching out to see if it could be a good fit for what they need. So yeah, it's really a great example, and I like that you kind of mentioned it quite a lot of times.
I have to mention it because I see so many startups only focusing on outbound playbooks, just outbound, like static outbound playbooks. And I think it's
Cold, yeah,
like, yeah, cold outreach. I think it's the most easiest one, but also the most difficult one because you don't know. You
right.
you have to search about signals. You have to personalize all messages. It's really complicated. Again, inbound and outbound, you already know that the person is looking for a solution like yours. So it's a cheat code,
Totally,
right?
totally, totally. Absolutely. I completely agree. Another thing that, we would do a lot, and obviously that startups should be doing, is like re-engagement campaigns,
Yeah.
even with like closed lost opportunities,
Mm,
re-engagement campaigns of folks that have signed up to previous newsletter, but that might have been dormant for times. Everybody who knows you and who've had contact with you, there are right moments to get back in touch with them to basically re-engage them at some point of the funnel.
yeah.
So I think it kind of goes along with what you're describing.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Listen, Nathan, this has been a really, really eye-opening and interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing all
Sure.
this. And again, I can tell that you've been doing this a lot. So where can people find you? Obviously on LinkedIn. Maybe you can share your LinkedIn,
Yeah.
URL. I'll also drop it in the show notes. Any place else they should be looking?
I'm mainly on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post on one channel first. Like I had a YouTube channel, but I think it's pretty dead for 1 year at least. But yeah, mainly LinkedIn, and that's great.
Well, I mean, you're busy enough with all the clients you're
Yeah,
working with. You basically told me that I don't have time right now, so I can't work with other clients.
yeah,
Maybe at some point in the
yeah,
future,
for sure.
which is awesome. So that's good for you. I think definitely for folks saying the job market is tight, there are some career paths that are super hot. GTM engineer is one of them,
Yeah,
and you're a perfect example of that. So again, congrats on all your progress. It was really, really great to have you on. And we'll be back in touch for future updates and workflows that you're working on.
sure. Thanks.
Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.